Hi everybody. In the next 40 minutes, I'm going to speak about the most important best practices to apply when you write end-to-end tests and how Cypress can help you doing that. So probably you know Selenium or Puppeteer, and they are generic browser automation tools, and Cypress is one of them. It allows you to automate the browser, and as you can see, it runs your application in an iframe inside a real Chrome instance. But the most important thing of Cypress is the test runner that allows you to check whatever the frontend is doing. Who I am? I'm Stefano Magni. I'm a frontend developer. At the moment, I work for Conio, a Bitcoin startup based in Milan. I love everything about testing and automation in general, and you can find all my social links in these slides. But don't care too much about taking notes because these slides are publicly available. So just after the talk, I'm going to tweet them on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on LinkedIn, on Facebook. And remember that everything that is underlined is a link. So if you consume these slides at home, you can find a lot of links to the corresponding resources. And in general, best practices are highlighted with blue. My two testing principles in general, and there are a lot of testing principles. I'm not telling you anything new, but always remember that for me, the two most important things about testing is that tests must not fail for nothing. I hate false negatives. When you write tests and you have your application that works, but the test don't work, this is a real bad experience because you are going to hate your tests and remove them for your pipelines sooner or later. But if they fail, because it could happen, and if a test fail is a good thing because it prevents me from sending a bug to the production environment, okay? But if a test fail, it must tell me precisely what didn't work in the front end, okay? So I can fix it in the few amount possible. And first of all, why end-to-end testing in general is hard? Remember that I'm talking about a front-end application. So when I mean end-to-end testing, I mean a browser that runs the whole front-end application and tests it. Why is end-to-end testing so hard? First of all, because it has a lot of contracts to be tested, because a front-end application has a functional contract with the user, okay, because your front-end application must work. It has a visual contact with the user, because we always spend a lot of time on our CSS part of the project. It has a standard, sorry, this is Google now, not. And it has a contact with HTML, and it has a contact with the server, because if you consider your front-end application a black box, okay, it has contacts with the user and the backend. And we have to test every one of these contracts. And there are a lot of things that makes end-to-end testing hard, because in the browser, in the front-end application with JavaScript and in the browser, everything is completely asynchronous. And end-to-end test needs a lot of data, because if you are developing an e-commerce, you need a backend with a database, with a registered user, with a lot of fake orders, just to test that your front-end works. And in general, debugging an end-to-end test is really hard, because if it's hard to debug a front-end application, it's harder to debug a tool that runs the front-end application, okay? And everything is slow with the front-end, because the browser is slow and takes a lot of resources. The UI is slow in general. You have a lot of problems with the network. And there are other problems that are most of the most famous tools that are usually Selenium and Puppeteer don't have a dedicated UI for your tests, because, okay, you are the browser with your front-end application, but not a UI about the tool itself. You can't understand what happens in the front-end step by step, and a lot of times you don't know precisely what was wrong with the front-end. Okay, the test break back, but what happened in the front-end application? And how could we make, in general, end-to-end test easier? So the first thing that I have to tell you that full end-to-end testing is not so important. What I mean, for full end-to-end testing, I mean a working browser with our front-end application connected to the backend, connected to a database. This is a full end-to-end test, okay? And in general, I can tell you that it's not so important because I'm a front-end developer. I need to test my front-end application. Then, when I finished with my front-end application, I must check that everything works. But while I develop, I need to test just my front-end application. And I can do that stubbing all the server responses, okay? So usually it depends on your application, but you can use some stubs or you can mock the whole server. But I really need to have to exclude the real backend and use the JSON responses from the backend and save them locally and use them with my front-end application. And in general, I call them UI integration tests because there is the real browser with the real front-end application, but without the server. That's why I call them UI integration tests. And they not depend on the network, they not depend on the server, and I don't have to reset the data because obviously from a test to the next one, I have to reset the database if I have a database, but if I exclude the database, I don't have to think about that. And I can replicate even some complex corner cases without a real server. And for Conio, at the moment I'm working mainly on the back office, and I benchmark the tests, and I can tell you that my UI integration test, so the whole frontend without the backend, takes just more or less 2 to 3 seconds for every test, but the same test with end-to-end, with the real backend and database, takes 20 seconds for test. I can't wait so much for having feedback about my front-end application. And these are 2 videos. I know that they are pretty small, but at the bottom you can see the UI integration test. So Cypress running my application without the backend, and at the top the same flows but with the backend and with the real database. And you can see that the UI integration tests are really fast compared to the end-to-end ones. And so that's why I use mainly the UI integration tests while I'm developing the front-end application. So the first best practice is to write just a few end-to-end tests and spend your time as a front-end developer with the UI integration test without a real backend. You can tell me, oh, Stefano, are you crazy? Are you telling me that I must not test with the real server? No, I'm not telling that, but write just 5, 6, 10, 20 end-to-end tests and spend your time writing 100 or 200 UI integration tests, okay? And Cypress allows us to do that easy because when I wrote my test, I just have to tell Cypress to intercept every Ajax request that comes from the front end. And in this case, I'm telling Cypress, so please, every time that you see an Ajax request that is a post call to the out token URL, please respond with this fixture. So from my front-end application, it's completely transparent because the front-end application makes an Ajax request, but Cypress responds almost immediately, okay? So from a front-end application perspective, everything is okay. A lot of times to test something like that, we add strange condition to our front-end and we change the code base, but we must remember to remove this kind of code, and Cypress allows you to do that automatically. And in this case, this is an example about a registration form and an authentication form, sorry. And when I click the button, I'm sure that Cypress will respond with this JSON instead, so this Ajax request doesn't hit the real backend. And stubbing the backend has a lot of advantages because if I don't have the real backend, I can simulate with Cypress a lot of interesting corner cases, okay? And even simulate a status with Cypress. So I'm a front-end developer and I can test that my front-end application works in all these strange cases because it's not so easy to simulate a 500 status with a real backend. But if I don't have a real backend, it's easier. And I suggest you to write end-to-end tests just for the happy path. So if I'm developing an authentication flow, I write an end-to-end test just for the happy path when the user can log in, but I don't test when the user can log in, when the user is not registered, etc., etc., etc. And obviously, not only the happy path, but if there are some flows that are important and valuable for your company, you have to write end-to-end tests on them, but not for everything. Okay, but what about the client-server contract? Because Stefano, you are telling me that you don't test with the real backend, so how you can be sure that your JSON responses, your fixtures, are the right ones? Well, obviously, the backenders give me all the responses, and more in general, I test everything that, imagine your front-end application as a black box, okay? Everything that goes out from that black box must be tested. And the communication with the backend is one of the things that you have to test, because a lot of times the front-end application breaks because of a misaligned communication between the front-end and the backend, okay? And so there are a lot of problems with AJAX request because the front-end application could make the wrong AJAX request with the wrong payload, and the server could respond with the wrong payload, not the payload that I expect from my front-end application. So always with the authentication example, with Cypress, I can give a label to every AJAX request. Then I can assert about the whole content of the request payload. So I'm sure that I must be sure that the front-end application use the right payload when communicating with the server. And I can do the same even for an end-to-end test. So I'm sure that the front-end application sends the right payload. And with an end-to-end test, when I have even the backend, the working backend, I must check the status and the response payload. And more in general, obviously the backenders must have their own tests. But as a front-end application, if I want to be really sure that nothing breaks in the backend, I can even keep controlled, for example, the GraphQL schema or the Elasticsearch mapping or everything that allows me externally to understand probably something changing in the backend. And for doing that, you can use a lot of different tools. Obviously, one of the best is Pact, but you can even make your tests for the backend with Postman, and you can use even Git or snapshot testing. Or in case of Conio, I even develop a small npm package that allows me to understand what changed in the GraphQL schema right in the terminal and save the changes in an HTML file so I can explore them and go into the backend. And so, Guido, you are on the backend and you changed the GraphQL schema. What happened? Oh, sorry, Stefano, I didn't tell you about that. No worry, but I know that from my tests, and I don't discover that in production. That's the important thing. One of the most important best practices is even to don't add unnecessary sleepings to your tests, because a lot of times, especially with Selenium, we are used to stop the test. And so I know that there is an AJAX request. I compile the form, I click the button, and there is an AJAX request. So I can wait for 2 seconds. Okay. But sometimes 2 seconds are not enough for an AJAX request, so I wait for 5 seconds. Then I wait for 10 seconds. But remember that 95% of the time, an AJAX request, in my case, takes just 1 second. But my test is paused for 10 seconds. And this is a real bad practice because the more your tests are slow, and the more you are going to hate them, remove them from your pipeline, and you are going to not have immediate feedback from your tests. And that's a real problem. So instead of add fixed time sleepings, remember to wait for deterministic events. What are deterministic events? If I made with the example of the authentication form, we know that we fill the form, we click the button, and the AJAX request must happen. the AJAX request is a deterministic event, okay? And so I must wait for the AJAX request, not for 10 seconds. That's nice. And more in general, a lot of things are deterministic events in an end-to-end, in a front-end flow. Obviously, AJAX request, but even UI elements that appear, okay? We know that after, for example, I can make an example where in the authentication form, I show a loading to the user, but if the AJAX request takes more than 2 seconds, I want to show one more message to the user, so please wait because there is something wrong with the backend. And this UI element appearing is another deterministic event. And even a lot of things that are very, very valuable for your business, because if you are developing a front-end application and your flow must complete when add something in Redux, especially that is useful for the next flow. Okay, so this data in Redux, for example, is important for the next flow. This is very valuable for your business, and you know that this data must be in Redux. So this is one more deterministic event to be checked, for example. And Cypress helps you with that, because Cypress automatically waits almost anything. When you visit a page, it waits up to 60 seconds for the load event. When you try to get a DOM element and use that, it waits up to 4 seconds that the element appears, because we know that sometimes the DOM elements appear after something that is running in the front end. And if Cypress doesn't find the element, no problem, I wait. I try more or less every half second, and then after 4 seconds, I give up. And so unfortunately, I can't give you the UI element that you're looking for. And the same is for AJAX requests, because Cypress waits up to 5 seconds for an AJAX request to start, and up to 30 seconds for an AJAX request to be completed. And Cypress doesn't wait for everything at all, and so I made even one more plugin for Cypress that allows you to wait for something not expected from Cypress in general. And here you can see the loading, and Cypress that waits for something. In this case, is waiting for the AJAX request to be completed, okay? And it's really nice because when you have a real browser and communication between front-end and back-end, you must wait a lot of things, and the Cypress waits for that. A lot of other tools don't wait the same way that Cypress does. And one important thing is to expose some shortcuts from the front-end, and if you're speaking about authentication in general, that is usually it's a good example. You must expose an authentication shortcut from the front end, because if you are testing the creation of a new post in your project, you need an authenticated user, okay? But how can I reach the state of the front end when I can create a new post? Obviously, you can open the front end and compile the form, and so you have an authenticated user. But reaching the state that you need through the UI is a bad practice because it's slow. And one of the solutions that you can take is to expose from the front-end application a shortcut that Cypress is going to use. In your Cypress test, you are going to get the user authenticated, calling directly this global shortcut exported from the front end instead of filling the UI and clicking a button. Obviously, I know that you can tell me, so you are making the global scope dirty just because of your test? Are you crazy? You are exposing some shortcuts in your project just because of Cypress? Are you really crazy, Stefano? I think that for the sake of the test, it's a real good practice, and but remember that if you have a transpiler like Webpack, you need just 2 minutes to replace window.cypress with false when you go to production, okay? And then Webpack with Uglify will completely remove this condition because it knows that no one can enter this condition if false, okay? So I use these shortcuts while I develop and while I run the tests, but for production, this condition is completely removed, okay? So I know that I'm not making my global scope dirty. Consuming some shortcuts is really fast because I have even, okay, this is an example. This is an example of a test that needs to authenticate the user to the UI, and the same with a shortcut. I have saved 1 second. That's not so much when I have 10 tests, but if I have 300 tests, 300 seconds are really, really, really so much. Okay, and more in general, another advantage is that you have the authentication flow in the front-end application, okay, and you can invent a lot of ways to have the same result, the authenticated user, from the test, okay. But if you expose a shortcut from the front end and the test just calls the shortcut, you have one authentication method and not two different authentication ways to be maintained, okay. And the same way you could expose some shortcuts from the front end, some functions, you can even expose some constants, because a lot of times the front end breaks because of some little changes. If I have my authentication form with a button with the text sign up, and the text changes to, for example, register, okay, the front end works, but my test is going to break. And that's a false negative. So the same way, I can even import a lot of constants from the front-end application and use them in my tests. In this case, this is an example with a URL. So instead of navigating the /login URL, I want to import which is the authentication URL from the front end, okay? So if the URL changes from login to sign in or something more, I don't have to care about the test. The test is going to work as usually because the front-end application is going to work as usually. If I change a URL, the front-end application doesn't break if we programmed well. And remember even to assert frequently, because the more you assert, the more the test helps you finding what goes wrong, okay? And this is a complete example of the authentication form with all the assertion in these cases about the payload, both the request and the response. And this is important because I could check even only about the status, okay? But what if changes the username? If I change the username, if the front-end application doesn't pass the username to the server, I have the test tells me that something goes wrong with authentication, but without telling me why. And in this case, if I miss some data in the payloads, the test is going to tell me exactly what happened in the front end. So without, I can even read the log and understand what happened and fix the front end directly without, okay, stop, open Cypress and find the right test that was broken, okay, launch the test, exclude all the other tests, and then I launch, oh, okay, now the authentication is broken, and I inspect the network course, and I understand what's wrong with the authentication method. But the more I assert, the more the test is useful for me. And this is the kind of feedback that Cypress gives you with these kind of assertions. So it expects a username property with a value and a password property with a value. So that's why I have immediate and precise feedback if something goes wrong. Remember even to split the different kind of tests, because until now I have spoken about end-to-end tests and UI integration tests. And these kind of tests have different purposes, okay? And if you name them wisely, you can exclude or run just only of them. For example, in Conio, when my colleague, the backender one, is going to push everything to production, he wants to be sure that everything works from the work perspective, so he he pull my project and he runs my end-to-end tests. Okay, but just the end-to-end ones because he's a backender. He doesn't want to test everything about my React project, but just the end-to-end tests. So he's sure that everything works. And in general, with while I speak about end-to-end testing, I have three kind of tests that are the end-to-end tests, the UI integration ones, and even the ones that I call monitoring tests, that are small tests and really fast tests that check something like the sitemap.xml file exists and is the correct one, the robots.txt file is the correct one, and if I ask a broadly compressed asset to the server, it responds with a broadly compressed assets. And this kind of tests, I call them monitoring tests because are pretty technical. They are not about user flows. They are really fast. And I launch them a lot of times during the day because I want to be sure. I want to be prompt if something goes wrong with the server without opening myself the real website. And always remember to test the front end the same way the user consumes it. What does that mean? The user doesn't care about selectors. He cares about contents. But usually, we write end-to-end tests that are based on selectors. We ask Selenium, Puppeteer, or Cypress to give us the UI, the DOM element with a previous class or with an ID. But in this way, my end-to-end tests could go all green, even if I completely remove the labels, the placeholder, the text from the button, okay, so that end-to-end test goes well, but the user can't fill a form without contents. So my test is the front-end application works, but the user can't use it. So I don't think that it's a good end-to-end test. And this is made easy by some plugins like Cypress testing library from DOM testing library from Ken Dodds, or Cypress XPath. And as an example, I could retrieve the DOM elements by the text or the placeholder, okay, instead of a selector. And that's fine. So if my front-end application works but the user can fill it, I know that, and I can fix that. Okay, I introduced a bug, no problem. And there is one important advantage in that. If we base our DOM nodes retrieval on selectors, when a test fails, we have three cases. The DOM element doesn't exist. The DOM element exists, but it hasn't the attribute. And the DOM element exists, it has the attribute, but not the right one. And to understand that, we must relaunch the test with the UI and inspecting the DOM element, etc., etc. But if I base my test on contents, I just need a screenshot. Okay, the test failed. Cypress automatically saves a screenshot of my test and even a video of my test. I take a look at them and I understand in a while that I completely removed the button. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. And that's useful because the less time I spend debugging why a test and why the front-end application breaks, and I'm more happy. I have more time for coding instead of debugging. And in general, if you are a TDD lover, I have a lot of good news for you. But even if you don't apply TDD in your company, is not a problem, because one of the things that I try to push is to use Cypress as a main development tool, not only as a testing tool. And why? First of all, because Cypress has a nice interface, okay? Obviously, we run Cypress in a headless mode in pipelines, but we could open Cypress, like the videos that I showed you. When I work locally, I work with the Cypress interface opened, okay? I could choose the test. I could choose even on which browser I want to run only Chrome. I want to run Cypress, and that's important because why you test manually your application before writing a test in Cypress? Usually, we are used to, I create the input button, and I test it manually. I create another input button, I test it manually. I create a button, I test it manually. Then I write a test that does the same that I have done probably for 2 hours. Okay, the same actions, but Cypress is faster than me. So why I should test manually? Well, you can tell me that in Cypress you don't have your DevTools. You don't have, for example, the React DevTools. But remember that Cypress creates a Chrome user, a dedicated and persisted Chrome user on your local machine. So in different projects, you have the same Chrome user. You can tell Cypress to use Chrome and not Electron, because Cypress by default use Electron, a sort of soft Chrome, but you can even use your own Chrome with a dedicated user and install your extensions. Okay, so you have the React DevTools right in Cypress. So please stop testing manually. Stop using your own browser before writing the test. And the test runner is amazing because it allows you to understand everything that's happening in the front-end application. For example, if I'm writing a test and the front-end stops working, I could take a look at the test runner. Oh, I forgot to stop this request, so this request is going to the server, but I'm working without the server. So don't worry, I stop even this request. And this is really easy. This is made easy because of the test runner. And it allows even time traveling. This is a video that allows you to understand how Cypress allows me to check every snapshot of the front-end application. So if something goes wrong with the test, I can even time travel in the test and understand what's happened before the actions and after the actions. And it's a unique feature of Cypress. No one of the existing tools allow you to do that. And even the error reporting is amazing, because a lot of time with Selenium or Puppeteer, they tell you that they can interact with an element, but why you can interact with an element. And Cypress allows you, Cypress improves your life, because, for example, if it can't click an element because of a fixed element that covers all the elements on the page, it tells you precisely what's the problem from a user perspective. Okay? And there are even a lot of useful plugins like skip and dolly plugin that allows you to add skip and dolly to the test right from the interface. And you have even Cypress watch and reload, because remember that when you are writing your Cypress tests, every time that you save the tests are rerun, just the ones that you have opened in the interface. And if you use Webpack, every time the Webpack compiles the application, the tests are rerun. And but if you have some custom compilation, don't worry, because there is a plugin that's Cypress watch and reload. And the Cypress dashboard is perfect for CI pipelines, because Cypress is completely free and it's open source. The only product that you have to pay if you want to use it is the Cypress dashboard, so you can understand what happened with your tests without reading the log of your pipeline, but reading directly the Cypress dashboard, where there are uploaded even the videos of the test. So Cypress is completely free. The Cypress dashboard you have to pay, but you pay only if you want to upload your videos on their server. And a lot of other cool features. As I told you, Cypress automatically saves the screenshot and the video of the test if something goes wrong. You can control the clock, so if you have to test a flow where you have to wait for a set timeout of 2 seconds, you can even mock the whole clock and send the time forward by 2 seconds, so your test is going to take just probably 1/10 of a second. And you have even code coverage from end-to-end testing, because this, until now, it's impossible, because how you can mix your unit test code coverage with the code coverage from the browser? It's impossible, because but But I test my front-end application in the browser. I test everything, but I have a ridiculous low code coverage. But Cypress has a dedicated page with all the necessary steps that you have to export the coverage from the browser and mix it with your unit test one, okay? And all of that to tell you that you don't have, most of the time you don't have to test your front-end manually. Please leverage the speed of Cypress instead of testing manually your front-end application. And usually I use that to convince some front-end developers to start with testing, because even if you don't care about testing, care about your time. Cypress allows you to save a lot of time, okay? And when you are finished with your Cypress script, you have a test. You already have a test without writing the test itself. And some common questions about Cypress. Does it support only Chrome? Because it's the first question usually. Yes, at the moment it will support only the versions or every version of Chrome. They are working on cross-browser support. But please remember that most of the time, not all the times, but 90% of the times, you don't really have to care about that. Because if you have a transpiler, it's strange that your JavaScript works better in a browser than in another one, okay? Most of the problems with cross-browser comes from the CSS part, not from the JavaScript part. But remember that with Cypress, we are checking almost the Cypress part, the JavaScript part of the project. And for testing the CSS part, I suggest you to integrate other professional tools with Cypress, and that allows you to improve the performance of CSS checking with their own server. And is Cypress free? Or I already told you about that. Yes, you have to pay only if you want to upload your videos on the videos of your tests on their servers. And is it all about front-end testing? No. Cypress solves the biggest problems with front-end testing, but you have a lot of things to check, okay? In 45 minutes, I can't tell you everything about front-end testing, and that's why I spoken only about Cypress and not every kind of test. And for every kind of test, there are a lot of different tools that I suggest to use, but unfortunately, I just have 5 more minutes, so I can't tell you anything about them. The only one that I want to spend some words is Storybook. Storybook is used for components documentation, for style documentation, but Storybook has a lot of interesting plugins, like story shots, for example, and if you are a diligent developer with a diligent designer, you probably leverage a lot Storybook, and Story Shots is a plugin that automates all the snapshot and visualization testing directly on Storybook. And 2 days ago, I and my friend Jaga talked at the Italian React conference, a full day workshop, a full day course about everything related to front-end testing. And probably we are going to repeat this course, and if you are interested, or if your company is interested in hosting your own course, please drop us a line. And I'm even working on a big book on GitHub. At the moment, I'm just at 10-20% of the contents, and if you want to participate in the project, let me know, don't worry, and you are welcome. In the slides, you can even find a lot of resources, the resources that I think are the best ones to start with front-end testing in general. And thank you for all. That's all. I think that I have saved 6 to 7 minutes. So if you have questions about that, feel free.
We see that you can easily mock responses from servers.
Okay.
What about WebSockets?
Okay.
Can you mock payloads from
Yep.
messages coming to server?
The concept is the same, and with Cypress you can. I usually don't use it because at the moment in Conny we don't use WebSocket, but I saw a lot of examples in the Cypress documentation where you can do the same with socket. So I'm pretty sure that you can do that. No more questions? Okay, that's all. Thank you for coming.